who's in the right here, Gemma or Richard?
Oh, we all know who's in the right here, Jemma.
It's one of the biggest mistakes we've ever made.
I just want to start by saying I have massive respect for Gemma. I just think she's incredible.
Gemma, don't lie to the people, Gemma.
This week's hero of the week is Jemma Forte, who nailed it in a debate with Richard Tice. However, I also want to talk about how is the richest man in Roman history, Crassus, connected to a disaster capitalist known as Ben Habib.
This is probably a 100-year thing. We may not know till after we're dead.
Oh, great. Well, I can't wait to be dead and really enjoy it, and my kids be dead. It's great. It's going really well for them as well.
From the start, absolute burn of Brexit, although obviously no factual reasons just yet, but they're coming.
Gemma,
he's going to cheer you up, Gemma.
Let's just go back to Germany, which is in recession.
You love talking about Germany.
Because it completely undermines your hopeless case.
No, it
Germany
doesn't.
is in recession. It's doing worse than we are. It's the biggest economy in the Eurozone, and that proves my point. It's got nothing to do with Brexit.
And Germany's problems have got nothing to do with being in the EU. We're not saying that being in the EU solves all problems. What we're saying is being in the EU makes problem solving easier.
It's because of over-regulation, over-taxes, and the madness of net zero.
I absolutely love it. This is what they do. Andrew Neil tried to do it on Twitter. He got community noted.
This is the very same Andrew Neil who claims that the EU is all evil, and yet he lives in France and enjoys all the benefits of living in the EU. So what is damaging Germany? We can break this down into 3 parts. A poor energy strategy that hasn't really brought in nuclear power, which has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine and Russian gas being cut off. This has sent prices through the roof for electricity, and that's had a knock-on effect to its manufacturing, and its economy is a little bit too reliant, according to some economists, on manufacturing. So what does any of that have to do with being in the EU? Nothing. Richard seems to think that being in the EU should make you recession-proof, but that's not true. What is true is that Brexiteers promised that everything will be better after Brexit, and yet everything has been worse.
With the German whataboutery, and it's what you do to try and gaslight us again.
Are you denying Germany's in recession?
No, absolutely not.
I rest my case.
Absolutely. No, what's ridiculous. It's so unnuanced. We know that the reason Germany are in recession, and you know as well, is because of their over-reliance, which was a massive mistake on Russian gas.
Okay.
Talking of gaslighting, here's another example of Richard gaslighting someone who tries to explain to him Brexit's damaged his business.
I'm a small business owner and I take past events throughout the year. I know probably 400 or 500 business owners. And when I say a business owner, I'm just a small sole trader. I sell prints, frames, events throughout the year, flower shows, that kind of thing. And pretty well every cost of mine material-wise has gone up since Brexit because a lot of it comes from abroad. Glass, my moulding, and so I've kind of been. I would love to buy stuff in the UK, but obviously it's a time and a half more, and so I try and keep my prices. And
where are you importing from? Other EU countries?
Other EU countries and countries that the product comes via France because it comes over on containers.
Richard, that is a problem. Let's try Richard on that.
Look, there's a free trade agreement between us and the EU, so there are not tariffs on goods that come from the EU.
Why is he having to pay more then?
Because of other factors such as energy costs. It's got nothing. There are no tariffs.
So he's now saying that gas is a problem, not for just the EU and Germany, but for all of us. So again, a bit of flip-flapping from Richard. And what an amazing noise from Jemma.
Tariffs?
Look at the face of hatred on Tice. Have a listen to this.
Gemma, don't lie to the people, Gemma. There are no tariffs.
Wow.
There are no tariffs on goods between the EU and the UK.
But there are customs checks. Here's Jacob Rees-Mogg, a Brexiteer, saying there are customs checks that increase cost.
It would have been an act of self-harm if we'd gone ahead with it. It would have increased costs for people, and we are trying to reduce costs. So that's the purpose of not going ahead with them and trying to ensure that the border flows as smoothly as possible, which benefits everybody. Free trade is hugely advantageous to consumers. If you look at small deliveries of things like cheese...
Is that correct or not?
Brexiteers who, like yourself, the charlatans that sold it in, say. James has just explained about his small business. And in the break, I said to you about small businesses being hampered, and you said verbatim, well, small businesses are only 10% of businesses. And I was like, oh, right.
I didn't say that, Gemma. Again, don't lie. What I said was...
Here's Richard saying something very similar about Northern Ireland.
Brexit issue, and claimed that the amount of trade crossing the Irish border was, to use your own words, and I quote, irrelevant. Can I say as a point of information, There is no such thing as an Irish land border. It is a UK border imposed on the island of Ireland. The Irish border is the sea. If you think it is irrelevant, can you now speak to the social and political implications to the people of Northern Ireland if a hard border is introduced, if you care so at all?
A picture tells 1,000 words, right? Think of a glass jar with 1,000 Smarties in it.
I was going to
Good.
note your analogy, which was horrific, by the way.
Oh, hang on. 1,000 Smarties. Those Smarties represent all of the trade that goes across all the 28 countries in Europe. Okay? The trade that goes across that Irish border is between 1 and 2 Smarties. It is a tiny, tiny amount.
How dare you? This is not about economics. I've asked you about the social and political implications for the people of Northern Ireland if a hard border is introduced.
It's not going to be introduced because everybody has said it's not going to be.
When you say everyone's not said it's going to be, that's not what Jean-Claude Juncker has said. He said there has to be. We can't just have animals coming across the border without being checked.
You know better than the people of Northern Ireland, the politicians of the Republic of Ireland. And
everybody has said they're not going to impose a hard border.
If there's a no-deal Brexit, there could be an upsurge in violence. That doesn't worry you at all.
Look, of course, everybody should be worried if,
You don't sound very worried. You just made an analogy about Smarties, and we're talking about the return of violence.
They do not care if some people get damaged along the way, as long as they get the Brexit they want. But as you'll see a little bit later on in their advert, that's not what they're promising to the public. And in that video you just listened to, Richard is advocating for open borders. Have a listen to what he says now about open borders.
I voted to come out. I'm sorry I did that.
Okay.
If I had my time...
Well, let Richard try and reassure you here, Pat.
Yeah, look, Pat, the point is that it's a great opportunity, but the government hasn't done what they said they were going to do. They haven't reduced taxes, they haven't cut unnecessary regulations, they haven't taken advantage, they haven't controlled our borders so that actually we can grow wages for British people. These are all the opportunities.
How's that, Pat?
Mass immigration has made much more pressure on public services, Pat.
Interesting that he's claiming there are too many people because in 2023-24 in the first quarter, the NHS is estimated to have 126,000 vacancies. 43,000 are among nurses. So we've got uncontrolled mass immigration, according to Richard, but it seems that we've got a recruitment issue in the NHS. And it isn't just there. Have a listen to this about farming.
And then you look at farming, right? They've lost their subsidies, they've lost their protections, they are struggling because we used to get perhaps Romanians coming over for 3 months, doing the jobs and going home. Now they're having to get expensive visas, they're going overseas. So the idea it was ever going to really curb immigration...
Jemma's wrong about farming?
She's completely wrong about farming.
Richard just said there are too many people in the country. Well, watch this clip from farmers saying they can't get anyone to come and work on their land because there aren't enough people. And take note, they're not just saying it on any channel, they're saying it on Richard's favourite channel, GB News.
You've really highlighted an important trend, the fact that we're wasting lots of money, wasting lots of perfectly good food because of a lack of workers to bring it to market. It seems almost immoral.
It absolutely is immoral. And it's actually, the situation's getting worse. Earlier on in the year, we were ourselves absolutely desperately short of workers. We employ about 700 staff ourselves at the peak. In May, we needed 300 people, and we could only get 120 people. Now, the reasons for that are twofold. One is we had a lot of people due to come to us through the seasonal workers scheme, and they were recruited predominantly from Ukraine. Obviously, due to the war in Ukraine, people couldn't travel. We then had to recruit from other countries, which we would have managed, or we did manage, but then it took 6 to 8 weeks to get a visa processed to get those people into this country, which is just ridiculous. Whereas in Holland, Germany, where they have similar schemes, the governments there can process those visas within a week. So that led to some significant crop losses for our business. It's amounted to 45 tonnes of asparagus, 700,000 bunches of spring onions, with a total value to us of about £250,000. Now, as well as that loss to us, we then had to replace that product with imported product with a higher carbon footprint, and that actually costs more.
Starting to see a pattern here. He's saying one thing, then demanding another, then complaining about the opposite thing. None of what Richard is saying is making sense, and Jemma is doing a great job of holding him to account.
That's what the Tories have done.
It gets to the point. It's like gaslighting.
You're completely unaware, clearly, that there's a seasonal agricultural workers scheme where people can come in, they can pick fruit, they can help with that, and maybe And that's what's going on at the moment, Jemma. Are you unaware of this?
No, I'm not unaware of it.
Because
I was listening to a farmer trying to talk to Jacob Rees-Mogg. It was painful. And he was saying, we are trying to grow vineyards. We cannot get the seasonal workers from Europe, which was just easy, right? It was frictionless. And now we're having to go to Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, all these places, and issue expensive visas at a cost to us. It's a lot more hassle. We can't get the workers. We've lost our subsidies. We've lost our protections. And like you, he's just going, no, that's not true. Like, listen to people who actually do the job.
And what we're seeing is a bigger problem with our birth rate. Something interesting I've also noticed in this graph, which will probably drive Richard mad, is that the birth rate is going down until we go into the ECC, which is the foundations of the EU. And it goes up and up and up until, again, we leave the EU and it starts to go down again. Part of the problem for the UK is that its birth rate is so low we're not replacing people, and that puts a strain on the economy, which also then further exacerbates having more kids. One of the number one reasons that people aren't having children in the UK at the moment is because it's too expensive. The other issue that we seem to be facing is that 500,000 people a year are leaving the UK because we've got trade agreements with countries like Australia and New Zealand, Canada and the United States. People are going to those countries instead of staying in the UK. This is having a detrimental effect on everything within the UK. And part of that, and part of the reason we're not able to get people to come over to the UK at the moment, the pound has dropped in value since Brexit. That means coming over, working here, doesn't have the same economic benefits as it once had.
There are different farming subsidies out there that actually should probably be increased. But a lot of the subsidies are going into rewilding, which is ridiculous. We should be using our productive farmland for growing farmland.
I don't know why, but Richard really seems to hate wildlife, and the UK has got a massive issue at present with its wildlife, which is part of the reason why these EU rules were brought in and kept on, including for housing. We're trying to protect lots of species that are on the verge of extinction, and Richard's going, scrap it all, kill them all, who cares? And it's like living in a bubble. He does not realise that actually if you affect the environment, it affects you, and that we're interconnected. It's just one of these things, unfortunately, with idiots.
I think it's a great opportunity. I think the vast majority of people who voted Brexit don't regret the vote. What they regret is the incompetence of this government.
No, they want to rejoin. This is a poll that has come from GB News, and you could only vote in it if you're a member of GB News. The Rejoin EU party even suggested if there was £1,000 on the table or rejoining the EU, which would you choose? 92% said they'd rather rejoin than take £1,000.
If you look at Bloomberg, Reuters, the OBR, the IMF, Goldman Sachs, like, they all admit that Brexit is a fundamental disaster because we have lost 100 billion upwards in money, and our GDP has gone down, and we can all feel it, right? So inflation is up, we're in recession, our food prices. And when you produced that video for Leave EU, Richard, it was...
You'll benefit from better care provided by our NHS thanks to the reallocation of funds from the EU budget. Controlled immigration will lead to reduced waiting times for you and your loved ones. Your wages will rise thanks to better controlled immigration, which will lead to less competition for jobs. Your weekly food shop will become cheaper. Food prices will no longer be inflated by agricultural policies controlled by the EU. You and your family will benefit from a resurgent economy led by new and flourishing small businesses following the removal of burdensome EU regulations and red tape.
It was a fib. You produced a video, look it up, right, on YouTube, and it's like, ooh, if you vote Brexit, everything's going to be like living in a spa, like Utopia. You'll be straight to the front of the queue in the NHS. Is that the one with the spa in it? Pretty much.
I saw that video. That's a comedy video now, isn't it?
You'll benefit from an NHS run almost completely into the ground, thanks to the reallocation of funds from the EU budget to hedge fund managers, conservative cronies and disaster capitalists. Controlled immigration will lead to fruit rotting on the trees, the needless slaughter of tens of thousands of healthy pigs, and increased hospital waiting times for you and your loved ones, as all the crucial workers from overseas will have buggered off.
The one where you say
your
hospitals
food
will be
prices
empty.
will be low, yeah. Hospitals will be empty.
But I suppose that's advertising, right?
Look, the point is, if you're going to do a job, do it properly. We trusted the Tories to do the job properly, and fundamentally they haven't. But I'm sorry, Gemma, all that stuff, all those people you've quoted, the Bloombergs, the Reuters, they all said...
OBR.
Right, the OBR, what? Is that like one of the worst forecasting organisations we've got that's never accurate? Again,
Reuters.
always wrong.
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs. It's literally a right-wing organisation, Bloomberg left, and they're all saying the same thing. And Richard just doesn't want to believe it. Well done, Gemma.
A lot of people voted for Brexit because they thought that all that money was going to be going into the NHS, which was a complete and utter lie.
Nonsense, Gemma. More money's gone into the NHS than even was talked about on the...
Two things to that. First, the money that was offered and given to the NHS, it was a large sum of money, but it was given whilst we were still paying money into the EU. So that money was always there. It was just a government decision not to pay the NHS, probably because they want to run it down. If you want some evidence for that, have a look at these statistics, which show the actual spending that took place in the NHS from 1990 to 2024. And you'll see that the peak of it was actually under the Labour government. And since then, under austerity, the Conservative government have run it down. But the Brexit Party, with Richard Tice and Nigel Farage, decided to latch onto that and make you think that it was actually the EU causing the problem, when it was government decision-making. Now back to that original question, how are they connected? How is Crassus, the richest man in Roman history, connected to Ben Habib, a disaster capitalist?
Why are you formed as a private, limited company and not a political party like the Greens and the Lib Dems and everybody else?
We are a political party, we just happen to be a not-for-profit company. That's just the way we're structured.
He's literally answered a question almost as if you're asking, what is an apple? And they go, it doesn't matter what an apple is an apple is an apple.
We are a political party, we just happen to be a not-for-profit company. That's just the way we're structured. It's irrelevant to the policies we put out there. It's irrelevant to voters. No one asked me on the door about that. What they asked me, what are your policies? Can you make a difference? Can you win? Those are the key things that people ask.
Well, you see, I worry about it being a business because you've got people like Ben Habib who obviously stood for you, but like he is on record having talked about the volatility of the markets post-Brexit and how he capitalised on that and made money.
Have a listen.
Well, interestingly, we will be very gung-ho about the UK if we get a vote for Brexit, because if we get a vote for Brexit and if the commentators are right that sterling will weaken and the markets will go into a degree of volatility, we'll be looking at that as a really great opportunity to buy assets in the UK. You know, we don't agree with the view that the UK economy is going to be damaged as a result of Brexit, and any short-term volatility therefore becomes a buying opportunity. So, depending on what happens on the 23rd of June, you know, I think we'll be very active.
So here comes the history lesson, and I'm actually going to show that even though what Crassus did was evil, he was probably less evil than Ben Habib. Crassus was born into wealth, but one of the ways he made money was by going up to houses that were on fire with a slave crew who would put it out on the condition that the owner would sell the property to Crassus. He would then get slave architects to come in to fix up the houses, and of course this would all be done at a low price and he'd have a high turnover. This is a form of disaster capitalism, but of course Crassus wasn't setting the fires, he was just a disgusting opportunist. What Ben Habib was doing was essentially telling everyone to vote in a way that would help and benefit him to buy assets at a cheaper price. That is also disaster capitalism, but he would hit the equivalent of him and Crassus would be, he would be setting the fires, then bringing his fire crew to put it out, and wouldn't put it out until you bought it. There is another level of evil within Ben Habib than with someone like Crassus, who is pretty disgusting. Talking of disgusting, have a listen to Richard Tice trying to calm Gemma down.
Question somebody's integrity about why they're in politics.
Relax. Absolutely relax. What we need is need more successful people.
I guess when you're having truth bombs dropped on you left, right and centre, your only other avenue is to try and control the person directly in what appears to be a misogynistic way.
Actually, you want poacher turn gamekeeper. You want successful people coming in saying, we've got serious crisis. These are some of the solutions to get the country back on track. I think that's a really good thing.
I think disaster capitalists in politics is incredibly shady and exactly what we don't need. I think there's a massive conflict of interest there.
Well, do you want less successful people to get involved in running the country?
Define successful. What's your definition of success? If it's multi-millionaires who are betting against the British pound, I don't think that's good for British politics.
If you've got a track record of building thousands of homes, employing tens of thousands of people, attracting hundreds of millions of investment into this country, and then saying, actually, I've got solutions as to how we can solve the housing crisis, how we can get the economy growing out of recession
That's not what I was just talking about.
Well, but the inference is the same. We're all successful people who are saying now is the time to step up and help save this country from the crisis that we find ourselves in.
He openly said it. A poacher is someone who illegally hunts game. So he's saying that Ben Habib has done something illegal or immoral. Oh, there you go. Stabs his man in the back. And here's Ben trying to justify himself.
Prepared for no deal. You've set aside for your property business, which buys, when prices go down, £182 million to buy projects hit by a slowdown in the British property market. So you line your own pockets with everyone else going bust.
Emily, you need to distinguish between the economy and markets. What I'm saying is that the economy for Can I finish? The economy for the United Kingdom will be absolutely fine. The markets shouldn't go weak at the knees. They went weak at the knees after the result of... Can I just finish? At the result of the referendum, sterling fell.
Yes.
When we now look back at it, the GDP growth of the United Kingdom in the 6 months post the referendum was the highest in the G7. It was either second or the highest in the G7.
Ben, can I just quote you? Because you said before the referendum, if we get a vote for Brexit and if the commentators are right that sterling will weaken and the markets will go into a degree of volatility, we'll be looking at that as a really great opportunity to buy assets in the UK.
There's Crassus.
So when things are going down, when sterling weakens, as that is going to happen, we think in no deal, you profit.
Emily, you're making the distinction, you're failing to make the distinction between market movements and the economy. I think
I'm making the difference between somebody who's in property investment and somebody who might actually find their business badly hurt.
I will buy because I believe in the UK economy. I'll be putting my money where my mouth is because I think it's wrong for sterling to drop. I think it would be wrong for the property markets to drop. I would be buying on that judgment, on that conviction.
Imagine Crassus saying, I'm buying these properties because the area needs redevelopment after such a serious fire. I'm actually investing in property in Rome to make it better, not to line my own pockets. No one would buy that then, and no one should buy it now. He's a Brexit profiteer. He deliberately orchestrated in such a direction that would line his own pockets. He was happy to do that. On that cheerful note, thanks for listening. Bye for now.